Welcome, everybody. This is Kraken Cast. We are kicking off season 3 of Kraken Cast. It is a podcast where we get to know better creatives, be it creative directors in the gaming industry, Twitch streamers, YouTube creators, artists, and the like. I'm your host, Octavian. Today, we're joined by 8bitDee. 8bitDee is a retro game streamer, Twitch partner, founder of the GlitchCo stream team.
Thanks for having me.
There's obviously a lot of things around streaming, a lot of different things you can stream, but what ultimately made you make the decision that you wanted to create live content?
So I kind of started not on like the traditional streamer path. Like I had been on Twitch for years. I started watching Twitch when Twitch Plays Pokemon was a thing. Like, was that like 2011? Like years ago. Probably not even, I don't even remember the year, but and then I kind of just like I had an account that existed and I kind of just never I never understood it. I was like, oh, that's complicated. I'll never figure out how to do something like that. And why would I want to play games in front of other people? Like it just didn't click with me. And then I was really into Instagram for a bit. It was like a creative hobby of mine. I love to collect art books of games and merch and stuff like that. So I was actively posting a lot of that. And it just so happened that as my Instagram kind of grew and took off, I started getting like a lot of opportunities with companies and stuff like that. And I would do like sponsorships, and so many of them would ask me about Twitch. And I was like, no, I don't do that. And then other creators that I started to become friendly with would ask me about Twitch. And I started visiting their channels. So I kind of got my foot in with a lot of like separate communities on Twitch and like started visiting streams a lot and learned about it as a viewer, really, with people that I was friendly with in the industry that I had met through Instagram. And then a dear friend of mine, his name is Luffy. He was like, no, you need to do this right now. And like I couldn't go into his stream without him telling people that I was going to stream soon. And yeah, it just kind of everything happened at once. I was going through a breakup at the time, or like knowing one was coming. And I was like, I'm going to probably need a social outlet because I'm going to be in a dark place. And I had just like my cat had just passed away and I was feeling lonely in my own house. And I was like, I need something. So it all kind of, I was like, let me try the Twitch thing since people keep trying to get me to do it. And then I just did it. I went live my first time on a MacBook laptop with like no good lighting. Like it was a very scuffed moment. But it happened, and I'm very like fortunate. I had a community right out the gate because I had already had a pretty like significant Instagram following. I got a lot of support out the gate, and yeah, it just kind of became my safe spot, and it's like what I just ended up doing all the time.
That's really awesome. It's, again, everybody's path then is so unique and different. There's a couple of things you mentioned there that would be wonderful to touch on. One of them is I also spent a lot of time, many years on Twitch just as a viewer, long before I thought, oh, I actually want to create content. So it's interesting and always fun to talk to other creators who are kind of the same way, where they were a viewer first, because some people just jump into streaming without context as to what the Twitch space is like. So I think it's interesting and also kind of really informative, because I consider, for me at least, part of my streaming career, hobby, however people want to phrase it, as actually watching other Twitch streams, seeing what people do well, seeing what I can adapt to myself. And I'm curious, from watching other streamers and things like that, was that kind of how you kind of built your initial style before it evolved into what it is now, but like kind of the initial, like how you kind of framed your style as a broadcaster?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I knew right out the gate that like, okay, I want to be a community streamer because I enjoyed being in the spaces that were focused on community first. And I enjoyed the spots where like maybe a lot of gameplay wasn't happening, but I really liked the streamer. And I started to then realize, okay, well, if I'm doing this and I'm going to jump in, I'm going to be the reason people come. I'm going to make it about me, my interests, and like sharing things. Like I wanted someone to come in and talk about a game and I could be like, oh my God, I have this book. Let me go grab it. Like I wanted it to be that because that's what I had seen. And I just knew from visiting streams, like I was not having fun if I wasn't engaging with the streamer, which is kind of where my focus was. I was like, I'm going to be super attentive to my chat. I'm going to be all about like the community, and I'm gonna make sure that that's my like immediate focus.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because obviously the biggest thing people will say, or the thing I like to say, is you need to know what the value you provide to your audience is, and that can be top end gameplay. Some people want to watch the best of the best, but if you're not the best of the best or striving to be the best of the best, then it's kind of hard to. Gameplay might not be the focus. Like you said, you wanted to be a community streamer, so your value is engaging with community, sharing your hobbies, your passions, and things with your audience. Some people will get into it from an educational point of view, things like that. So I think it's really great that you knew going in, because I think when people are starting out in streaming, some people have to find that through streaming, but I think going in knowing like the value I provide to my audience, or the value I want to provide to my audience, is community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of with that, speaking of community, as you mentioned, having community out of the gate, and that's another area that I think we both kind of share in, because when I first started streaming before I moved into games, I started in just chatting because I talked a lot about live action role playing, things like that I couldn't stream due to COVID, but that's what I talked about. But that I had that community. I also had the Elder Scrolls Online community. There's a lot of communities I was already part of. So by jumping in and having that community, and I think a lot of people don't always think, even if your community is just your friends, like I see a lot of streamers who stream to one person or 0 people, and that doesn't make them bad streamers. Some of them have amazing streams, but I think there's something to be said about knowing what your community is, even if it's just a couple friends or family members or a bigger community you have elsewhere to like start off with, so that you have a base. Because I think Twitch makes it very hard for people who don't have some form of like base that they're bringing into the platform, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And that's why even like I talk about that a lot. And even though I had a base in a community, I still had to put the work in to grow, because I knew Twitch wasn't going to do discoverability for me. And I've done a lot of social media stuff, and I know that's one way to go about it, but I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to grow mainly through platform, which is what I've done. And a lot of that had to do with the games that I played over my entire journey. It was always like, what is a directory that's going to get me in front of people that are going to enjoy what I have to say, and knowing like what directory is the right size, and knowing which one is going to speak to my content best, which is actually how I found the ESO community that I was a part of for a very long time. And it's a lot of work. And I tell people that all the time. You have to have, to some degree, I think, an analytical mind to understand that the hurdles of that, because even with someone coming into it with a community, you can plateau so easily. It's just how Twitch is.
Yeah, Twitch is definitely, streaming is basically a land of highs, lows, and also a lot of plateaus. And I think that also poses a unique challenge, is when you experience a lot of growth, it's very easy, if the growth is consistent over a period of time, to go, okay, I'm just growing at this rate. And then you hit one of those glass ceilings, one of those plateaus for whatever reason, be it the director just doesn't have enough people, or you're not pushing your content in the correct way, or the way that it engages, whatever the case may be. And I think a lot of people hit that and stop, or they hit that and they just assume, oh, I'm not growing anymore, I'm bad, I'm not a good streamer. So I'm just curious how you approach that when you hit a plateau, and you hit like one of those places where maybe your numbers are a little bit lower, or maybe they've just been consistently the same for a while, you're not experiencing growth, how you mentally, because I think it is really difficult on people's mental, how you deal with that mentally, how you deal with getting through those plateaus, and deal with maybe the stress of feeling like I'm not growing quick enough, or my stream is no longer growing.
I've especially now, and this takes time, I've learned to surround myself with a very small group of creators that are, either have the same ambitions as me, or are in a similar, like they're honest, and they understand like the basics of streaming. They got that down, and we're all kind of in the boat of like wanting to evolve, and willing to listen, and willing to ask those questions, and be honest with one another. So I have a really small circle of other creators that I can lean on and talk about these things with, and talk about directories. And my mod team, I'm really, really great. I'm really grateful. Not I'm really great. No, I'm really grateful for my mod team, because I am able, and I know other streamers don't have this relationship with their mod team, but I can go to my moderators and say like, hey, this is what this is doing for us. Like, so what's the next step? And if something isn't working, you know, I can go to them and say like, is it my energy right now? Because I'm not feeling this, or is it the game? Do we think it's the directory? What do we, and we can piece together those bits and see what's going on. So I can ask them objectively if they can sit there and say, no, it's something you're doing right now that you're trying out that's not working, or it's just something we have to look at game selection wise or whatever. And it's made it a lot easier because then I'm not sitting there going, oh my gosh, I'm so bad. Nobody likes to watch me. I'm not funny. And I can sit back and I can instead, you know, go to my mod team or go to my close friends that are also, that do this full time. And they can say this happened. Like I know example, and I know Erica is in chat. Erica New Girl is one of my moderators. I know T Prime was in chat earlier too. It was one of my mods. We were all trying to figure out what was going on when Elden Ring came out, because a lot of directories took a big hit when Elden Ring came out. And I don't think a game's launch has affected Twitch as significantly as Elden Ring ever since I've been on Twitch. You know, there have been huge launches that were everywhere, Lost Ark, whatever, but they didn't affect me because they weren't an MMO and I wasn't doing MMOs anymore, or there's just different circumstances. It's wild. Like when Elden Ring came out, we were seeing such a loss everywhere. Every single category was like down. So at least to have other creators go, no, oh my gosh, I'm like, I stream over here and it's happening here too. It's that comfort of going, okay, we have to just go with the ebb and flow and like focus internal and not worry too much about it. So I think that's a very long answer to a simple question, but I think you need to surround yourself with people that are going to give you clear-cut, honest advice and that don't gatekeep information. Because I've found over the years of doing this, I would talk to other creators that did it full time, or maybe were a little bit ahead of where I was or where I wanted to be. And they were very like to the chest with information. And I have never been that way. And I've always been about like talking openly about the business side of this stuff, and also the growth patterns and things like that. And I think it's fine to talk about it. So, yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. You touched on a lot of really, really great points there. I want to make sure that we cover all of them. I think just kind of starting with one of the more simple ones is Elden Ring, because I think Elden Ring also presents a unique situation, not just in directory size. It just happened to coincide with basically a lot of people's unemployment, a lot of people's work from home, a lot of other factors are affecting the world. But I think whether it's the directory like you were mentioning, or it's a game release, or it's these other factors, yeah, I've seen a lot of people who like are really like stressed out. A lot of creators who are like, why did my numbers go down? What is going on? And like you said, the massive game launch, Elden Ring is like, yeah, a phenomenon. And then you add in people going back to work, at least here in the States, you add in them having to go back to the office where they might not be able to just second monitor up a Twitch streamer anymore. And a lot of these other factors, I think, definitely have played into that. But in addition to that, I think the most important thing you talked about there is a support network, be it your mods. And I think mods are a great support network. If you have that connection with them, other creators, and I want to talk more about networking here in a bit. It can be family, it can be friends, but I think if you go into this without a support network, or don't develop a support network, like you said, it becomes very easy to get in your head. Okay, I streamed this, my numbers were bad, and am I failing? Oh, I went back to this game I did well in, and now I'm doing worse. And then it's just you confronting you, and I find, personally at least, we're our own worst critics. So without a support network, it becomes very easy to, I feel, get into a very dark and negative space, just assuming, oh, here's the 10 reasons it could be, and this 10th reason is the worst, and that's got to be it. People hate me now. So I think the most important thing there, and I really wanted to emphasize that, is the importance of making sure if you're getting into streaming, and it doesn't just have to be streaming, anything, is to have a support network, have somebody or somebody's in your life that can, as Dee just outlined with her mods, you can bounce things off of, or can tell you, no, that's not the case, or you're overthinking this, or no, that actually is the case. But that way, at least you can come up with a strategy versus that.
Yeah.
And And I think the other thing I wanted to really kind of touch on that you touched on there is analytics. You said people who get into this have to have an analytical brain or should at least kind of understand analytics. And I agree with that. So I have a background in brand reputation management for burgeoning tech companies. And the truth is you can't analytically look at anything without 90 to 100 days of info. So that kind of 3 to 4 month avenue of information. And I'm just curious, when you take a look at analytics, how you look at your analytics, because for me, I always look at it in that 3 to 4 month segment. I go, okay, I'm doing a podcast. When I do the podcast, my viewership is down. But but by waiting 3 months, waiting 120 days to look at it, I can see, oh, more and more people are engaging. Whereas I think some people try one new thing, it doesn't work the first time, even though they really love it, and people might love it in the long run, and they just drop it right away. And I'm just curious how you look at your new content, if you look at it on like maybe a long timeline like that, or if it's something you do look at on a short timeline.
So it's a little different now that I do variety, because I was always a streamer that had a genre or had a game that I mained the whole way until recently. Like I say recently, but it's been like a year of me doing variety. So when I was doing one game, I very much so was somebody that was kind of taking it a month at a time. Especially because I had a very quick rise, like to where I was that streamer that was always kind of naturally in like a 50 CCV viewership. And then my first day with ESO, I don't know what, it was right place, right time. And I was suddenly just like, it was just to the moon. So it was a very overwhelming time. So it was hard not to get caught up in the day by day, because it felt like it was a fluke. Because I suddenly was like, okay, well, I had 100 people in the stream today. And then the next day was 120. And then the next day was this. So, even then though, I still would step back and, like you say, I have a history also in operations management. So I was like, okay, let's look long-term, because that's always how I was trained. So I didn't even apply for partnership until I knew I could maintain those numbers over a period of time. So like I unlocked the app, I still didn't apply until like a month and a half after, because I wanted to see if this was like actual long-term growth, which I think is why I got approved my first time, because I didn't wait for Twitch to tell me that. I just waited in myself to feel it out and see. And now that I do variety, it is a little bit different. I do what I've been doing lately, and my mods are probably laughing right now, because I went full time with streaming on March 1st, and I was starting to get that natural kind of panic that streamers get with growth, because I saw so many people around me dealing with their numbers going down and whatnot. So I was like, okay, well, are my numbers up because people are excited I'm full time, or is it an accident, or am I going to crash and burn? Like, what's going to happen? So I started to look day by day, which is not healthy. But I was like, well, I'm a variety streamer, so I need to see if this is working when I try this on Mondays, and this is working this day. And it just got too much. So now the much healthier mentality that I have is I look week to week, which I don't even recommend everybody does, but it's what's been working for me. Is my work week is Friday to Tuesday. So I stream Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And then Tuesday night, I will look at my analytics, having not looked at them for the week. So that we tried that out, and that was like much better for my mental, because then I can just focus on the streams and how they feel and how they're going. And then if I'm actually looking at like the health of my overall channel, I will pull up my 90-day, because I feel like that's a really good picture of all of the work coming together.
Right. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think looking at analytics has to do a lot with, again, what people can handle. And yeah, like I said, maybe everybody can't handle weekly. I look at my day metrics, but I do so with the reminder that it's one day, and that doesn't necessarily reflect on anything. It's more, I kind of look at what I was doing at different hours in the day and try to like compare that to past streams. But I don't recommend most people also look at their day numbers, because your day numbers, again, can be very non-confirming. Like I can have a day at 120, a day at 120, and a day at 50. All 3 days could be the same game. And if I look at the 50 and just assume that that's everything, then it's it's going to put me in a bad headspace, and it might cause me to veer away from something that's actually going to work in the long run. And that's, I think, the most difficult part as somebody who's in variety, where you have to look consistently at how is my audience driving with the game. You're obviously looking at that a bit more than people who might have one solid game or things, but I still think there's an element to that where it's risk and reward, where sometimes you look at your numbers, go, okay, this is working, I want to maintain my growth. And sometimes you go, okay, I'm going to still do this thing on occasion because I feel like the community really vibed with it. And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit when you're talking about how the stream felt versus the analytics of it, which is this stream felt really good. So even though the numbers are down, maybe this is something I will take the risk on trying a few more times and seeing on a longer term thing if this is something that once people get used to it, because people love what they love until they don't love it anymore, is what I like to say, which is you can do the thing that they love and your numbers might grow or stay consistent until, because you've done nothing to change, they don't love it anymore. So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
In that regard, you mentioned talking to your mods, what you kind of do to try to evolve your content, because obviously a lot of people react poorly to when people change things up as a streamer, but also if you don't make changes, then eventually they kind of will inevitably fall off as they feel like the content is stagnant.
Yeah, I still don't think I have all that figured out. You know, I guess that's everyone though. Like every streamer I talk to, especially people who've been, I have friends who've been doing this full time for like 4 years, and they're like, I still don't have that figured out. I think that it's understanding the trial and error, but within reason. You know, when I switched to variety, I switched to variety, but I didn't really switch to like doing anything I want. I said, what am I passionate about? And for me, it's Japanese role-playing games. Final Fantasy is my life. It's everywhere, all over my house. I have Final Fantasy things on my desk at every second of my life. Like, it's just what I love. So I said, okay, what if I do variety, but it's just with different JRPGs? And then that was kind of when I said, you know, to my community, like, maybe I'll do some retro stuff. Like, we won't just do modern things, maybe. And I would tease the idea of being interested in it just to kind of see and make it a topic of conversation. Because I think if you just abruptly drop things on people, that's like, it's going to backfire most times, because no one likes abrupt change. I don't like abrupt change. So I think it's just kind of giving yourself the cushion to prep, and also to give people a reason why. You know, I talk about Final Fantasy games and I start crying all the time. So people know that I'm passionate about it, and they know that I care. And if they have an investment in me and something moves me that much, then it's going to make people more willing to check it out. I have so many people who met me through Elder Scrolls and games that I mained that are still sticking around, even though they've never played like half the games I'm playing now. And it's just because they know it's important to me. And now a bunch of them are playing different Final Fantasy games and stuff, which is really exciting. And even now, like my community actually bought me like my first bits of retro equipment to like kind of push me to get into it. So just by me talking about it, like, hey, maybe I'll stream some Super Nintendo RPGs. Maybe we'll stream Final Fantasy 4. Maybe we'll stream Final Fantasy 6. They showed up for it in a very like like I say aggressive way, but it's like lovingly aggressive, because I got a letter one day from a viewer that I had who I had seen them sub offline a few times, but they never talked to my chat. They wrote a letter to me and said that they found my channel through ESO that they watched with their wife, and they like started to like love the jokes of my channel, and they had a great time. And then unfortunately his wife had passed away. She had cancer. She had passed away, and he would still come back to my community because it was familiar, and it was like a comfort, and it was something that he loved with his wife. And when I started talking about wanting to change and get maybe into playing other games that meant more to me, because I just was feeling a little stale with streaming, he actually went and bought me an analog Super NT, which, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's an FPGA console. So it's basically just a part for part remake of a SNES, but it has HDMI. So it's like a little easier for streaming. And that was what like pushed me to get into doing retro. And that's kind of how I started this like transition into doing the old school like games that I do now. I mean, obviously my retro setup now is like so involved, and I have upscalers and tons of different things. But that was the thing. And I think sometimes just doing that and talking to your community about it, and maybe just teasing the idea that it's something you're interested in and you're passionate about, you'll be so surprised at who will come out and support you in that. Because I think you have, regardless, there's so many people that are invested in you and your content that you might never have heard from. You know, you don't know who's, like, there are a lot of silent viewers on Twitch that lurk and don't talk, but they're still really emotionally involved in your stuff.
Yeah,
so
lurkers.
I think that's how I
lurkers
do that.
make streaming actually work. That's what I like to say a lot. Because honestly, they really, really, really do. And I think that there is a lot of people. I mean, I'm a passive viewer. For example, I watched your channel, Camp Robber, mutual community member and friend of both of us, raided into you once, and I watched and I really enjoyed. And you were already doing the retro thing at that point. And then I just continued watching for a number of months before I ever engaged, because that's just who I am. I don't particularly like to engage in communities initially. It takes me a long time to feel comfortable. It's just who I am. It's part of the ADHD where I like to watch and study, and it's a trait of masking, but it's also just a trait of, I like to feel like I understand the person of the community before I engage. And I think there's a lot of people like that. And there's people who will never engage who still actively will view people's streams. I think, like you said, it's important to remember. And that's a really heartwarming story also. Sad, obviously, but also heartwarming that you had that community member who, was really invested. And I think you're right that people invest in the streamer. However, there's always that initial fear, and that's something that I personally am working through. And so I look to streamers like yourself, and you mentioned looking at other people in the community, people who don't gatekeep knowledge, because you're one of the people I look to go, okay, well, I'm not completely leaving the MMO space myself, I am trying to transition to other space. So I go, how did D do this? How did other people manage to do that? And I think that's a really important piece of advice, because some people can do one game for years and years and years. They can stream that game for years and years and years, and that's amazing. But a lot of people are also not built to do that. And I felt like I kind of personally created a stagnation in my own content because I was only doing ESO. I was doing what was familiar and what worked. And so I was not finding ways to challenge myself in that content. And just by doing content in other games, I felt like I unlocked some anime limiter that I had on myself, like dropping the weights in Naruto for Rock Lee. And all of a sudden I have all these ideas that for months and months and months, I just was stagnant just by branching out. I think that's something I want to talk about too, with you, is just, have you ever found that switching games up, or now that you do variety, switching games up helps you kind of not just be creative with that game or be engaging with that game, but be overall a more engaging creator no matter what you're doing, because you are not just so focused on one area of content?
Yeah, it's made it more fun for me. I loved doing, when I started out, I was just doing horror games because I love Resident Evil. That's my second favorite franchise of all time. And I would do a lot of Dead by Daylight and Resident Evil, and I had a lot of roots in those communities, and I loved it. But it is exhausting being around, specifically with Dead by Daylight. I found the community as a whole was a little aggressive, competitive. It's a competitive game. That's just not my energy. So when I left that, it was a relief to kind of explore other things, and I meandered around and I found ESO, and that was wonderful because MMOs have a very tight-knit community, but it ended up being the thing that really had to push me out of there, because similarly, I was stuck. I was stagnant. I was plateauing. I found that it was my time to go, per se. I started to get frustrated, and the days that I would try to do other things, I started to notice that people would come in and immediately complain that I wasn't doing ESO. And that was when I said, okay, I got to get out of this, because I never want to be somebody that's associated with one thing. And it was frustrating, and it hurt my feelings. It would hurt my feelings a lot. And to this day, because I think sometimes people don't understand that streamers are humans with feelings, and it does hurt to have somebody come in and be like, oh, you don't do that thing anymore. All right, I'm out of here. And I was getting that a lot. And to this day, I still have people who come in and go, you're not going back to ESO. And I go, no. And then they either don't talk again, and we know they unfollowed, or they say something, and it stinks. And that was kind of the time when I said, all right, I have to get out of this, because I saw that happening to me. Even on a day, if I was like, oh, we're gonna play Stardew today, I wasn't in the mood to like play ESO today. So I started that transition, and I'm much happier now, but it was extremely difficult at first because I could not go for a few hours without someone coming in and asking me about ESO. And I would politely, approach the situation and say, okay, well, what is it about me doing this that's so different? Like, why don't you want to be here? It's the same people, and we did hit, like, I did hit a big hit. There's always this like elusive partner drop that people talk about. Like when you hit Twitch partner, you get a big thing of support right beforehand. And then once you get the check mark, everybody kind of runs. And I don't know. I think for me, it was like a combination of that. Cause I hit Twitch partner in November of 2019. What was it? 2020, November of 2020. And then I stopped streaming ESO in like in like early February. And I just kind of had to tell people it was time to go. And I did take a hit. So I don't know if it was like the partner drop that people talk about, or if it was because I left ESO, which I do feel like that was more impactful. But the amount of times that daily I would have to say, hey, like, I'm still me making the same jokes in other games, and I'm talking about something that I'm a little bit more passionate about, and I would love to share it with you. Like, let's talk about it. But it was really hard, and it really honestly took me just pushing through, not looking at it took me looking through myself and where I felt. Like we talked about that earlier, like, how do I feel? I was feeling better after my streams doing, RPGs and playing the games that I grew up with. So I said, all right, we're going to fight through and we're going to find that new community. And I got really, 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 really embraced by the retro community. I got the Final Fantasy community. Like, you need those growing pains to just meet the other people in those spaces, which kind of ties back to like the networking thing we touched on. Like, it's just finding those other people that have those interests. And then those communities were a lot more receptive to what I was doing, where if I go to ESO, they probably would be like, what is this? I don't want to deal with it.
And so before we get into networking, because I really do want to talk about networking, I'm going to pop some things up on screen really briefly, just so people can get an idea factually what Dee's talking about. So this is a website called Twitch Tracker. And you'll notice if you look here, this is just basic overview data. As Dee mentioned, partnership, spiking after partnership, and then there's that post-partnership drop. And then as Dee moves...
That's a big drop.
And then as Dee moves into still doing ESO, but here, their last date playing ESO is February, March-ish. You can see this 96,106. It kind of builds up, and then there's this dip again, and then again, over time, as a lot of the community stays, but some of it goes because they're only there for ESO. And then that over time with this new focus builds back up. And I think this is the post-partner drop and then the switching game drop. I think these are the two areas that people are the most fearful of. And the minute they see it, will back off. And just so I'm not just trying to isolate these stats, I want to show is this is my growth as a streamer. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go. I'm a partner, post-partner drop. Building back up, and then the ESO itself has less viewership during this time of year, so we drop with that. And then here is me. This is, if you look at this, the kind of slope of this dip here, this is me still doing ESO, but I'm doing a lot more Elden Ring, and I'm doing a lot more Lost Ark and other games. And so you can kind of see a similar slope. Not the exact numbers aren't the exact same, but I think the percentages are what to look at there. And I wanted to bring that on screen really quick just to kind of show people with those numbers in front of them. Those are real things. Because there are people who like to ride the hype and they're going to be there. And when you get partner, they're not bad people. They're just there for the hype, and then once you get partner, they're on to the next. That's their thing. And I think people have mentioned it in chat, and people mentioned it before. if people don't like to watch a certain game and they are primarily a certain game player when you do another game and those people don't come with you, that is not the hurtful part that Dee is mentioning. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, please correct me. The hurtful part is the person, not the person who goes, I really love this person, I'll watch their content when they're doing other things, but for the most part, I'm going to just kind of stick over here in this directory because I only have so many hours to watch Twitch, and the game I want to watch is this game, and they're not doing that anymore. So I'll peek in on them here and there, but I'm probably not going to follow them as often. That person is fine. The person that really hurts a streamer's mental health or makes them feel bad is the one that pops in to make it a point to make sure they know, I am no longer watching you. Me, X person, Jones, whatever, I'm going to come into your chat just to make sure you know you have lost me as a viewer. That's the person that can really affect a person. It's not, I know when I do other games, X percentage of people aren't going to be there with me because they just prefer to watch Elder Scrolls, and that's fine. I like to look at the numbers I have. If the fact is, when I do Elden Ring, 50 people watch me versus 100 who watch me when I do Elder Scrolls Online, that's great. What I look at is I look at that glass half full. I go, 50 people are going to watch me no matter what I do. That's amazing. But that one person can really tilt it when they come in and go, why aren't you doing this game? And while I don't get a lot of those in chat, we have brought them into chat, or we brought them up in on stream before, because I will get Twitter messages when I do other things about how I've betrayed what made me a partner. Is one of my favorite Twitter DMs before I shut off DMs. So yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I have no issue if people listen. That's the beauty of Twitch. You watch what you like. I have no issue if people are like, oh my God. I have so many people that I know in mutual circles who don't talk in my chat because my chat's too busy. And I never take that personally. So like I get so many messages like from people on Instagram and stuff that are like, oh, used to love, I watched, but I won't talk. Like your stream's too much. It's too loud. There's too many people. It makes me anxious. And like that, I would never hold that against somebody. Just like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I used to watch like when D did ESO and now I don't really like that. I just watch other ESO streamers. That's not the issue. It's people that come in and are vocal to point out that it's not what they like that stick with you. Cause that changes the vibe of the whole room too. Cause every time it's ever happened to me, other people will chime up and go, yeah, I really miss that. And it's like, are you trying to guilt me? Like, because I'm doing something that makes me happy, you know? And we dealt with a lot of it. And there were other things too, like you just have different issues no matter where you go. There's always like even variety is great and I love it, but there's issues there too. Like as you can see now, I'm on an upswing, and I could pretty much, as long as I play a Final Fantasy game or I play something that's like a JRPG or I'm in retro, I am going to pull more viewership than I ever did with ESO. And I think a lot of that is just because I've taken the time to, you know, rebuild and whatnot. And the other part of it is that this directories change and there's trends and things you have to kind of just always be aware and know. And I wanted the flexibility of being able to adapt. I think a lot of us saw what happened with World of Warcraft specifically. And you could have a real massive directory take a real hit.
If you tie yourself to one game, you are tied to one game. If going back to the numbers I just popped up on screen there a moment ago, I mentioned when showing my numbers went down, and I go, that's because ESO is always down. The number of people playing ESO is always down around November, December, January, starts picking back up in March. So my numbers and a lot of ESO streamers' numbers were down. The directory numbers were down. And that's the thing, is when you tie yourself, like you mentioned, to one game, if it's World of Warcraft, or even if it's a game that does nothing bad, that just has a drop in popularity at times of year, or another game supersedes it, like you mentioned earlier with Elden Ring kind of taking everybody's focus for for a hot minute. All those have varying impacts, and if you're tied to one game, then yeah, you're kind of, if it goes down, you go down. If it goes up, you go up, and it can be a lot more jarring because you have no control of your destiny. I don't control how many people are going to watch me to the same degree when it's like I only play ESO's down in November, so my numbers are down in November. I have no control content wise to try to bring more people in there, so I feel more difficult when you tie yourself to one game.
Yeah,
or at least there's pros and cons, because there's also the pro of when that game is surging, you also surge.
Yeah, and a lot of that is timing. You know, there's a lot of games that I watch people like have so much success so quickly. And I know a lot of people felt that way about me too. When I kind of feel like ESO and I met at the right time because it was just surging at that time. But you know, there's a lot of it is I don't want to say I hate the word luck, but a lot of it is just kind of preemptively making those moves when they're good for you. Like I happened to just switch to retro at a point when the retro directory was also kind of surging and getting a little more relevant again. So it's just kind of bouncing around. You know, whereas if I went and streamed Elden Ring, I think I'd be drowned out in the midst of everyone doing Elden Ring. And also just because I'm not a gameplay streamer, really. I love Souls games. I absolutely love playing them. I'm like, and people are always surprised by that. But I love Soulsborne games. I absolutely love playing them when I'm not streaming. But I am somebody that, because of my glitches and stuff, I deal with a lot of neurological issues and I could barely pay attention to one thing at a time. So I could never stream that. And I know that that's not what that directory is going to want, is somebody who's like, you know, shiny and walking away and not actually fighting anything half the stream, because that's what it would be. It would be just chatting with Elden Ring in the background.
And I think that's another important thing. Two important things there. One is knowing the type of games that vibe with what you do. Sometimes I just want to talk for a long time, but I don't want to be in just chatting. ESO is great for that because no one in the ESO category cares if I'm just meandering around for 2 hours and chatting. Same with like certain games like retro games and things like that. Games where people are like, if you pause and talk, they're not going to be like, why aren't you progressing? But I also think the other thing about things like Elden Ring, and it's something you mentioned, is being drowned out. Because I think we've talked a lot of the focus of the first half of this podcast has been almost on the nuances of game selection that works for you. And I think that's the other thing, is I knew for a fact I would not grow in Elden Ring. I made the choice, and I made the choice to put a lot of hours in Elden Ring because I think it's fun. I think it introduces my community to a different side of myself. The dying 700 times, but celebrating the victory of when I finally get that boss kill in. I think there is a completely different vibe, but it's also a facet of myself I want to show, which is the competitor, the person who used to run marathons and pushes themselves. And I think that's really cool. But also, again, going back to game selection, since we've talked a lot about game selection here, is sometimes if you pick a game for you and your community, it's okay knowing that your community, it's not going to grow. There's no way to grow in Elden Ring with the biggest streamers. Twitch is top heavy. Nobody's scrolling down. Even if I have 50 people watching, no one's scrolling down to the 50 viewers. So I'm not finding new people, but sometimes it's important, at least it's been important to me, to do that regardless of it. But I think that should play into people's, again, your selection. If you are somebody who's streaming or growing as a streamer or thinking about streamer, when you're looking at the games to play, as super saturated directories make life much harder to grow in because you're going to be located so much further down that directory. So that's, I think, an important part, since we've talked a lot about game selection here.
And I agree also, like, you know, something for me is like community nights. We'll do marbles or we'll do Fall Guys, and like those are games that I know I go into those streams knowing they're going to like we usually half what I normally pull in terms of viewership, like, or worse. Like usually it's a cut. But you're not, I don't do them for that. Like the purpose of them is there to be with the community and actually let people pop into voice chats or like have people playing games with me. Cause I haven't, but prior to this month, I never had the time. It was like, I'm still only gaming when I'm streaming. So it was a way to like engage with people and stuff. And I know it's not something that's going to like grow my channel or like be part of that, but you also have to, I always say you have to feed your own house too, and take care of the people and remind them that they are the reason that you're even here in the first place, is that community that is going to show up for those kinds of things and be part of that too. And that's equally important. It's really easy to get caught up in like viewership numbers, especially being full time, because that's how we get paid, right? Sponsors pay by your viewer average.
CV, yeah.
Yeah. So that's like a big thing. And but one day isn't going to crush your whole month. And it's important to take care of your community too. And I think a lot of people like had to kind of struggle with that balance. I mean, I know I have even in the past, but I think it's, you know, you have to make decisions that are good for overall, but you also have to, like you're saying, make the decisions that are good for your mental, like an Elden Ring or something you really enjoy. or make the decisions that are good for the community too.
Yeah, and I think I always look at everything as sliding scales. Everything is kind of a spectrum, even when it comes to streaming, because yeah, if you can max out doing everything you can do for viewership, but you're going to do that at the expense of community. And then there's always the sliding scale, which is the creative side, which is, at least for a streamer like myself, I feel community is super important. Obviously, I want to play games and stuff that vibe with my community. I want growth, but also it's the creativity bucket. I feel like if I'm not doing something unique or different, like I can't do an event stream every stream, but if I'm not doing something new and creative, the longer that goes on, the more I feel unfulfilled. And I feel that comes through to stream. It's not just, oh, they're doing the same thing. It's, oh, they're doing the same thing. Also, they just don't seem to have, I feel like viewers can sense when your heart is into something, when you are into it. You can be energetic as all heck, but if like the undercurrent of your eyes, you have the kind of like the dead, like, I can't believe I'm doing this eyes, people know, oh, you're not really vibing with the content, are you?
Yeah. I've had to drop games for that too. Games that I love. I streamed my favorite game of all time, Final Fantasy IX last year, and I had to drop it midway because I had some stuff going on at the time in my community. I also had stuff going on, around that time personally. But so I think that was coming to the table a little bit too. But I was like, I'm not loving this, and it's my favorite game ever made. Like, I can't. We're not going to do it anymore. And I asked people too, and they just said, no, it doesn't seem like you're enjoying it. And that was like the feedback from everybody. Is like your community knows, people that invest the most valuable thing in the world, which is time, into your spaces. They know you a lot better than I think you even realize half the time. I've noticed so many times I've had streams where I felt a little off, and people would message me after and say that they could tell that I was off. And I'm like, how did anybody even know? Because like it wasn't so apparent, but people know, and that's the thing when they spend so many hours in these spaces, that it's very difficult to hide that kind of stuff. So you have to be honest with yourself sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, and again, having games for yourself or not games for yourself are also important, just to kind of build off of that. There has been certain games that I've chose not to stream, not just because I don't know that, just because my heart wouldn't be in it, but even if my heart would be in it, because for me, I like find it important to have certain things that are just for me, because sometimes there's something about gaming where I can just be quiet and engrossed, and there's certain games like that I choose not to stream because I get too engrossed. I adore really deep RPGs. There's one called Disco Elysium that I think is one of the most tremendous, transcendent, inspiring RPGs that's come out in many years. I would never stream it because even when I do subsequent playthroughs on my own time, I get too cerebral with it. I just don't feel like that creates it's the sort of game that I can't provide content for, because as much as I would enjoy it and people might enjoy it, I get too lost in it. I think I just wanted to build off what you said, because there's just so many factors in choosing games. And I know we've talked a lot about that. I want to kind of move on to a few other things. Something you mentioned very early on is people gatekeeping information. And I want to get to the importance of networking, the importance of information, and also just false information, because Twitch changes so often. For example, it used to be that if someone raided into you, they had a raid tag, and they still do have the raid tag. And if they have the raid tag, even if they watch you for hours, those numbers wouldn't count towards you getting partner. However, there was a statement months ago from like a head developer at Twitch who basically said that's not true. Even if they click your icon and get rid of the raid tag, what we now look for is how long they stay. So if someone stays 15 to 20 minutes, raid tag or not, we're still going to count them, and they'll go away from the like raid host percentage into your actual percentage. And I feel like between people who gatekeep information because they feel like this is a competitive space, I don't want my competition to grow, and the people who, because the information is not out there, kind of chime off this really poor information. I think an even better example is there's a clip going around because Ninja, huge streamer on the platform, everybody knows who Ninja is, as part of his like advice thing, his class literally says what you should do is open up your viewer list, and when you see lurkers, call them out. Now, anybody who's streamed in the recent history knows that is one of the worst things you can do for your stream. But it was probably true for Ninja when Ninja was growing back in the early Wild West days of Twitch. And
it's just a different landscape now. And it always baffles me because the streamers who are so willing to throw advice out there are streamers that came up in a time when just putting hours in was all you really needed to do. It's fascinating to me. I mean, even in my channel, I have anonymous follows. Like, you can't even see who's following my channel because I have anxiety and I never want to be called out places. So when I heard that advice come out, I was like internally cringing to such a degree because I don't even call out my people that follow my channel. Because I never, ever, ever want anyone to feel, I follow channels when I'm offline sometimes because I feel pressured to talk. I want to vibe, see how I feel about the community before I say hello. And yeah, it's, oh my God. Yeah. That one got me really bad.
Actually, that's something you do on your stream that I actually considered moving towards also, is the anonymous follow, because I feel like if someone follows and they want the engagement, I'm not a big enough streamer where they're going to get lost in the shuffle. And Twitch has this new feature. Basically, it will tell me if somebody's the first time chatting in my chat. So if somebody follows and then immediately says something, then that gives me a sign they want to engage. And I think what you do, I think that's I'm not saying everybody should move to that system, but I think that's a very considerate thing to look at. I've also think there's a lot of people, like, we get really stuck, and that's why I want to bring up, I think a lot of us get really stuck in things that have worked. Like, I have a rotating widget to show the last person who subbed, the last person who followed, things like that. I think a lot of streamers do, but I was talking to another streamer who's coming up, and they were like, is this important? And I had to think and honestly answer the question. I go, actually, I think and I've turned it off on some of my streams just to see. I don't think anybody really notices when it's gone. I'm like, no, I think that's something people started doing. People see other people doing it and they just do it. So it's hard sometimes to challenge the norms. Like, you challenged kind of the norm, and people who've turned on anonymous followers, I think that challenges like the norm, but I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to do that. And I think that's something that people should look at, that you've done and other people have done, is like, just because everybody does it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best fit for you, your community, or even the best fit for Twitch anymore.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, I had to think about my community with GlitchCo and stuff. I talk about a lot about me living with generalized anxiety disorder. And I've talked about, we have a spot where people can be really open about being disabled or being in chronic pain or dealing with a wide variety of pretty heavy topics. And sometimes people just want to listen to that stuff. And sometimes people, have questions about that, but they're afraid to ask. And I just think having the anonymous bit in there really just suit my community. I never am like somebody that thinks that that's needed for everyone. And I know why, like, I've had people come in and be like, oh, my name didn't pop up. And I've explained, like, hey, it's for this reason. And 99% of the time they're like, oh, okay, that's actually cool. I didn't think about that. So even just as a conversation piece, I think it's interesting. And I know a lot of other streamers have like been trying that out and they haven't had any negative feedback about it. Like, all the feedback I've had about it has been really positive, but that's, I think, because of the space that I already curate, that's going to make sense to people. Whereas like someone who's coming in and really wants that like constant attention may not like it. And it's a good like kind of litmus test for your community too.
Yeah,
a lot of the advice is scary.
Yeah, it can be really scary.
I used to cringe about the raid thing. I used to cringe with the take the raid command thing. Oh my God. I had a call with Twitch. I was on a call with Twitch. It was about something completely different. It was about a charity like stuff. But I remember Twitch staff talking about how many times seeing partner push in a title and seeing people beg people to take the raid commands off was such a turn off. And I always just thought about like, if I'm reviewing partner applications and I see that, I would be like, what is that? Like it just was something. I mean, I would never shame anyone for doing it, but I just always thought from Twitch's standpoint, I would feel a little less confident in a creator that was pushing that versus somebody that was just organically pulling partner averages.
Yeah. I even found myself though when I was going for a partner doing it. Like originally I wasn't. People kept pointing it out in my chat, so I felt like okay, I guess I need to say, hey, click my icon. But it's some things are weird and don't feel like a fit for a person's community, or don't necessarily feel like a necessarily a good fit for modern streaming. Something else I wanted to kind of bring up though in regards to that is I mentioned it a few times, you've mentioned it quite a few times, or alluded to it, which is networking. And so networking, I think, is one of the most important skills. I feel like it's one of my stronger skill sets when I try to give people advice. And I think there is this big nebulous world of what people think networking is, what other people tell people networking is, and what networking actually is. Because networking is just communicating and getting to know peers in your space without any expectations of them, right? So networking, I think, is super important. You get to know people through their streams. Maybe you get to know them through Discord or Twitch cons or other events. And as you get to know them better, then you can shoot them a message and go, hey. And then if people say no, that's fine. But I think a lot of people think networking is just being in someone's Twitch chat and then hoping they give a follow or give a raid or give a shout out, when truthfully networking, and then the value of networking is one, getting to know people, and then as I vibe with people, going, oh, this is somebody I want to get to know better. This is somebody I feel comfortable asking for advice. And I also want to make sure that they know they can ask me for advice. I mean, a lot of this podcast is built around networking, getting to know you through GlitchCo and things like that, and then feeling comfortable enough to ask you to be on the show. And if you had said no, then it would just been like, okay, cool. But I think networking is such an important thing. And I think it gets lost between two things. The one thing you mentioned, which is people feel, so Twitch is a competitive space in that there's only so many viewers, and people take that to mean it's a competitive space. So I am competing with other streamers, when truthfully competitive space means I need to produce the best product possible, create the best stream possible, so that when opportunities come my way, maybe people follow me or want to watch me again, versus I need to withhold information or be combative or towards other people. And then the other thing being the withholding of information, because I don't want somebody to grow because maybe they'll challenge me.
Yeah, the thing is too, I feel like it's a word that so many people have like stigmatized. It's kind of like streamers talking about income. And it's looked at like a bad thing, or like, oh, people are always trying to use each other. And I think that, yeah, there are some people that do not network in a very personable way, and you can sniff them out. I think a lot of us have probably had that person that comes in the chat and is like, okay, I gotta go do my stream now. And it's like, all right, you think that that's how this works, but that's not how this works, you know? And I think that a lot of people vilify it in a way. And it's always fascinating to me, because I feel similarly to you. Like, I find communities that I like, that I actively want to be a part of, that I think we have similar ideals, and kind of do that way. I mean, the reality too is that 1 in every 4 viewers on Twitch is a streamer themselves. So do they all have communities? Probably not, being as how, you know, I think, what is it now? It's if you average 20 viewers, you're the top 1% of Twitch, or it's lower.
It's lower.
Yeah, it's lower. It's you know,
five average viewers to put you in the top 2%.
There you go. So, you know, it's not that like everyone out there is like going to, you don't own your viewership. And I feel like we all say this and scream it from the rooftops all the time. You don't own your viewers. You don't own anybody. They're going to watch what they want to watch and who they want to watch. And why not encourage? There's so many people that come into my chat that contribute so much to my streams in terms of like laughter and chat and community. And it's always beautiful to see them grow too, because they meet exciting new friends that then also come into our mutual communities, and we all kind of share this pod, very much like GlitchCo, where we have so many familiar faces coming in and out of each other's spaces. And it's like a together to the top mentality, to me, is so much healthier than, you know, like locking everything away and not talking about it. And I've had a lot of people come up to me too and ask me about like similar things, talking about like leaving ESO. We actually have had a few GlitchCo members who started in ESO as mains and have moved on to other things, and all of us troubleshooting and talking about that process together helped all of us kind of grow into our own separate spaces and find what we're comfortable with. And now all of us are gradually kind of growing and settling in. And I think it's it truly needs to just be about building authentic relationships, which is always like the advice people are like, how do I make a community? I'm like, don't focus on everything out the gate, focus on one thing. And if you're focusing on one thing, it's be a presence in communities. Don't just be a person there, be a part of that community if you like being there, and build those relationships with those communities, because that's the emotional investment you're putting into them.
Right.
Is what is going to make it happen. That's why I've never really been a streamer that, I always say like, oh, I'm very lucky. I've never streamed to one person, but a lot of that's not luck. A lot of that is just because I was a presence in so many communities that when I first started streaming, it was, oh my God, Dee's finally streaming. Because I was already like part of these people's day-to-day routine because they saw me in so many places and we had those relationships. And I just think it's misunderstood a lot as like, I'll come in and I'll say hi quick and then I'll leave. And it's like, that's not going to make you memorable in a chat room. What will make someone memorable is I'll use a community member of mine. I know I've referenced Erica a lot, but we all know Erica here. Erica has a BDSM dolphin tattoo. And this thing, I talk about that being like networking gold. Because it comes up in conversation everywhere that anyone mutually knows Erica will talk about this tattoo. Because we all have a relationship with Erica and whatever. So if someone uses a dolphin emote and it's like, oh, that's a really cute dolphin emote. And it's like, yeah, she loves dolphins so much. She tattooed one on her body. And it's a topic of conversation and it's so memorable. And it's like this brilliant thing. And I always talk about it as a great example of like networking in an organic, honest way. Because we're all emotionally invested in this thing and we can't believe that she did it. And yet it gets talked about in so many streams that I go to. Everywhere. And I'm like, we're all talking about this because we genuinely think it's hysterical and we can't believe it, but yet it says everything you need to know about Erica as a streamer. Kind of like, an example, at least on my end, is like the whole, like, when people are nice to me, I threaten to punch them in the throat. I can't go into streams now in communities that I share without people being like, oh, let me hide, Dee's going to punch me in the throat. You kind of have to create that presence and have that inconsistently across those other places. Because when you have relationships with people, it tells a lot of new people who may not know you a lot about you at the gate just because of your relationships with other people. And I've had so many people come to my stream because they've heard these like memes and jokes that we have about me from other streams that I visit and hang out in that I just like being in. I'm not there like, oh, it's time to grow my channel. I'm just there to hang out. And then like next thing I know, like, oh, wow, so-and-so, said, oh yeah, Dee punches people in the throat. And now there's people following the stream. Like, it's just about that. You need people can sniff out when you're fake and when you're using people. It just is how it is.
I liken everything to a cocktail party because that's basically in tech how, and in convention spaces, because I also used to run conventions, how networking worked was always in a space with a drink. And you can talk to somebody for about a couple minutes IRL and get a vibe. And you can go, oh, this is a genuinely good person, but we have nothing in common. This is, glad we met each other. It's nice to meet you. You can talk to a second person and go, this person's kind of sleazy. They're literally just trying to get what they can out of me. And then you can go have a third drink with somebody at that cocktail party and that person is genuine. And also you're like, oh, we share. Here's a connection. And then you can build on that. And that's why networking, sometimes people just say, don't network, build friendships. Well, networking is very similar to building friendships, but it's also building those friendships and connections with peers. And like you said, people know people from things. So Reishi Spores, who's in the chat here, one of the first things they ever said when they came into my channel was hashtag community, not competition. And that's very true. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is community over competition, because again, competitive means it's a competitive space. It does mean you have to wear a bunch of hats. You have to wear a marketing hat. You have to wear a production hat. You have to wear a entertainer hat and all these things to do it. But it also doesn't mean you have to judge people. I think people get too lost in the sauce about so-and-so is only successful because of blah versus going, what does so-and-so do that I could also do that's similar to theirs, but twist it, make it my own to grow. And if people really look, and again, I watched a lot of Twitch before I streamed, and I consider watching Twitch and YouTube part of my job. If you look at the top streamers, the big streamers, the gigantic streamers, or even the large streamers, most of them, if you look at the actual meta, not the current game everyone's playing, not the current just chatting thing that everyone's doing, but the actual meta, they are playing games with each other. They are cross-pollinating their communities. Now, how do they choose who they're going to be with? Yes, they're doing things with people similar in size, but at the same time, they're not all collaborate. Everybody who's a 20K viewer, Andy, is not doing something with every other 20K viewer, but ones who share similar personalities, similar communities, where they know they can do that, and all of a sudden they're cross-pollinating. And I think that's the thing that I think is important when it comes to networking, which is instead of going into people's channels, being unauthentic, hoping they'll give you a follow or a raid, or shout you out or whatever the case is, when you make connections with people, especially people who are around the same size as you, similar size to you, that you can grow with. And that's what Dee had mentioned earlier with like GlitchCo and growing together, is you have people that you can not just bounce ideas off of, fellow peers who can then bounce ideas off of you, but you can also collaborate, because that's where this cross-pollination, people who would never have known about me might know about me. We'll just even use this podcast because Dee's on my podcast, or people who might not have known about Dee might know about Dee now because Dee was on this podcast. And this is as simple as a podcast, but that's where I think the real growth in Twitch can happen with communities. It doesn't have to be doing streams together, but it does come from, like you said, authentically making connections and getting to know each other on an authentic level.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, there was an interesting Twitch meeting about this recently, like one of the, they do this like seminars a lot. Yeah. And they were talking about most of the follows coming when you're not live. And I thought about that, and I was like, oh, I don't feel like, as I'm someone like I get a lot of follows per stream, and I was like, oh, I don't really feel like that's true of me. And then I went and I looked, and it really is a true thing. Like for me, at least my experience has been most of my follows come through me just joking around in chats that I'm comfortable in. And like, that's where the new blood is kind of coming into my channel. So you're absolutely right. Like it's an interesting thing, and it's coming together to be authentic is a lot more of a genuine thing. And I was laughing about the community over competition thing too, because I am about like maybe once or twice a stream, I do say that. And we have everyone in chat. I say, put a 1 in chat if you also are a streamer. So maybe that person you didn't know who chats a lot in the community is also a streamer, and you can now click and go watch them and stuff like that. And it's always interesting because you will have people who are like, have never really been active or who are brand new, who will put that 1 in chat. And so often someone will at them and be like, oh my God, I saw you stream this recently and I loved that. And it engages someone that's even new to the community to start talking about shared mutual interests and stuff. And they'll be like, oh, I was afraid to say anything, self-promotion. I'm like, it's a very different beast when we're talking about this collectively versus you just coming in here and shouting about it. And it's an interesting dynamic, because I think a lot of people, it takes a long time to kind of learn the water and the flow of how those things work.
It definitely does take a lot to learn that. And also, it's like you said, there's so much misinformation about networking. I, for a period of time, was very afraid to talk in chats that I was already active in for a while, because I talk and then they'd shout me out, and then I go, well, they shout me out every time I talk in their chat. I don't want people to think I'm just watching them to get the shout out. And then I feel this anxiety, like, though they never thought that, I started worrying, like, do they think I just pop in and talk for 20 minutes so I can get a shout out? So maybe I should. It's
streamer anxiety is a thing. It is a thing.
But like you said, the more you're part of communities and stuff, you kind of get an ebb and a flow. Like, I shout out a lot of people as well. I try to do my best to promote people in the community who stream. But again, that's the people who have been around. You kind of get a vibe for them, even if they're doing their best to like be on the down low about it. We've been kind of talking about a lot of amazing things, and I want to kind of start winding down the podcast portion so that we do have time for Q&A before you have to go for your own stream. So just a couple other things. We've talked about a lot of important things. I would be really remiss if the first time I ever had you on the podcast, we didn't talk about GlitchCo. I'm part of the GlitchCo stream team, but it's this team that you and a lot of others have been growing, this team that you've kind of founded that deals with people who stream with disabilities, invisible ailments, neurodivergent, and things like that. I'd just love it if you could talk about what led you to the decision not just to have that stream team, but grow that stream team and the effort that's gone on to create this space for streamers that GlitchCo provides.
Yeah, it was something that was always on my mind. So it kind of goes back to my own diagnosis. When I first started streaming, I was ill, but I had no diagnosis. And I went through a process of 5 years of not knowing what was wrong. And I had symptoms even earlier than that, but I dealt with like really terrible fatigue, body pain, and fevers. Like I was someone who would always have a fever. And I was like, what is going on? And I would always go to doctors and we can never get an answer. And getting a diagnosis for lupus on average does take about 5 years. But it was just something that never came up. And before I was a full-time streamer, content creator, I was a nurse. And I was like, I know something's wrong. And yet even I couldn't piece together what was going on. I was going through it with my community, really. And I would talk about it a little bit, but not a lot. And then got diagnosed. And finally it happened. And I remember it was pretty early on in my streaming life. And I got this diagnosis and I was like, I'm not really going to talk about it. And that was kind of how I approached it for a while. I was going through this thing. I would disappear for months on end, having medical issues, surgeries, blah, blah, blah. And I got diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, like wham, bam, back to back. And I was kind of closed about it at first. And then a year later, I got asked by a friend to reach out to Coco Confession, who's I found out had lupus also. And Coco was doing this charity event that she was running with the Lupus Foundation. It was called Game On to End Lupus. She asked me to do some fundraising. And that weekend was the first time I was really 100% open and transparent with my community about my diagnosis, the type of pain I was in during every stream, the way my brain was working, the way my lupus was affecting my day-to-day life, why I was doing no cam streams a lot back then, because my rash on my face from my lupus would be so bad. For anyone that doesn't know, lupus is an autoimmune disease that really fits the bill of invisible disability most of the time. Occasionally, it can cause like what's called a butterfly rash or a malar rash on the face, and I will get very, 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 very red when I'm flaring. It's a disease of like flares. So when I wake up in the morning, we call it like the lupus lottery. I never know how I'm going to feel. I could have like fatigue so bad I can't get out of bed, or pain so bad I can't move, or I could feel like I do today, which is like relatively okay. And I have kidney failure because of this. I've had some urinary like issues and surgeries and stuff like that. And it affects pretty much every single system of my body, because lupus is your immune system. Instead of protecting you, it is attacking your own organs and body tissues on a daily basis. So I started really talking to my community openly about how hard it was. And it was the first time I was ever really brought to do it. And it was so liberating. And so many people in my community came forward and said that they also have Hashimoto's or other autoimmune things or other invisible disabilities. And that whole weekend, we were just having these conversations. And I was like, I want to do this all the time. So I shifted my focus a lot from like, I'm going to be kind of closed off about this and talk about it more. And it changed. Like I had people who said in my Discord, like, it's depressing. I don't want to talk about this stuff. The streams become really depressing. And we had to like weed those people out of the community. And that's totally fine. I get it. If people aren't comfortable hearing about someone who's streaming and like in pain and dealing with health things and whatever. But I always laughed about it because I thought, we approached it in a very real way. We always say in my stream, it's supportive vibes only. It's not positive vibes only. And I started doing that more and more. And I started to meet other streamers that were dealing with lupus, to depression, to bipolar disorder, to Crohn's disease, to just a myriad of different things. And I was like, we need to get a place where we're all together. So when I started to grow my channel, one of the motivators was I could make a stream team maybe and have like this represented, because it wasn't something that I saw on Twitch really. I saw things for people with like physical disabilities, and there were teams for charity, and there were teams for these other things. But I'm like, what about the things that are invisible that people can't see? And yeah, so that was a big thing. Like just me being so into charity streaming and talking about that, and meeting streamers like Coco and, other people that were living with things. I just got really, really inspired, and it just kind of blew my mind that how much better I felt. And it gave me a sense of purpose. And especially now that I'm not doing nursing anymore, I love that I can still feel like I'm advocating for people. I'm like, that's my natural mode, is like to be an advocate. So I absolutely love that it kind of happened through that. And I reached out to 12 friends when we started. And I said, hey, I want to do this thing. Would you like to be one of the founding members of it? So we can kind of say, this is what this team is. And we launched, and it was mind blowing how fast it's grown. It definitely grew a lot faster than I had anticipated, which just goes to show how needed something like that is. The fact that we have over 100 streamers on the team, and we've kept our apps closed for like most of this year because we had to like take care of some stuff in-house. But the fact that there are so many people asking every day, like, when's it reopening? Like, we could have 500 people on this team like that because of how many people are living with these disabilities that you don't know because you can't see it. It's really fascinating.
No, it really is fascinating. Obviously, I have in a recent batch of applications did join the team, but I do think it's something that's super needed. I think there's a lot of different stream teams out there. People often ask me about different types of stream teams. There's tightly knit small stream teams that have a focus on creators who network together. There's broad stream teams that are really just like, hey, anybody who's like a friend. There's teams like this that I think have a focus to them, like a shared space. Again, back to networking, where people who have that kind of shared experience with their own glitches can come together and talk about that and share that space. And I think, again, providing those spaces is super, super important on Twitch. And I think it's really a great thing. That's why I wanted to make sure before we wrapped up the interview that we did talk about, since it's such an amazing team, something that, again, like you've mentioned, has grown rapidly. And I think it's one of those things that Twitch really needs, teams like that, teams of people who share experiences. Yes, they have tags to help people find each other, but having teams, shared spaces, and discords are so important to the overall experience as a creator, I feel.
Yeah, and even before, when we made GlitchCo, the tags didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So like it was even harder. I know a lot of people find me through the invisible disability tag or chronic illness tag now, but that didn't exist. So it was nice to at least have the stream team page to like hand to people and go, a lot of people here know what dealing with the things I deal with are like, or the things you're dealing with are like chronic fatigue, chronic pain, all that kind of stuff. And it's nice to just have that list. Like that's all I envisioned, was just like a list where I could go into those streams. Cause I had an encounter with a Twitch partner where they are very much so known for being like this really inclusive, awesome space. And I spoke up in their chat and they asked me how I was doing that day. And I had been a viewer of theirs for a while. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm having a really bad pain day, but it'll be fine. I'm just like happy to vibe here. And they were like, oh, and they got like disgruntled.
Oh.
And they just kind of glossed it over. And one of their mods added me and said, yeah, we like to keep the stream positive. And I felt so horrified and like embarrassed and disgusted, honestly, that I was like, oh my God, that's not happening in my stream ever. And, right. Cause I wasn't trauma dumping. I was literally just saying I had a bad pain day, but it's fine. So I made sure like with GlitchCo, at least to like have a list where that wouldn't happen to anybody. If you go to any of these streams, that's not going to happen to you. And that was like a really important motivator for me in setting that team up.
If you're familiar with it, we're going to do something called Smash or Pass with 3 Final Fantasy villains here real quick. Okay. So we're going to start with what I feel is an easier one, Golbez.
Smash.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Dark, foreboding. Like he's got all the bad boy vibes. That's an easy one.
Yeah. It's got a nice outfit.
Got a nice outfit.
Clean.
Very clean, very clean. Kind of keeping in the same vein, Smash Pass on villains, Chaos.
Smash.
Now you smash the embodiment of Chaos. That's fair.
I mean, it's just so epic. You can't it's especially now with Strangers of Paradise.
Oh, I guess that's true. That
Strangers of Paradise, Chaos is getting a comeback.
Oh yeah, I guess Chaos is getting a big bad glow up right now. So
yeah, glow up looks real good. Looks real nice.
I guess these have been pretty easy. Smash Pass, Kefka.
Obviously, Smash. No, it's not my boyfriend. I have a boyfriend command in my chat that has Final Fantasy characters on it, and Kefka is happily on there.
And with that, go ahead and please, can you shout out GlitchCo, shout out yourself, everywhere people can find you?
So all my socials now are 8bitDee, except for Twitter. I still have the cursed "the" in front of my name. So I'm at the 8bitDee on Twitter. That's probably my most active social media. And then yeah, you can catch me live on the Twitch, on the Twitch here. I now am full time, which I'm still not used to saying, and I stream every single Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday at 5 p.m. East. Next week, we'll be starting at 4 p.m. East because we have something special going on that I can't announce yet, but it's gonna be real exciting. And yeah, GlitchCo. I always have to emphasize this just because our applications are closed right now. The stream team is such a tiny, tiny part of what GlitchCo is and does. GlitchCo's Discord is really the heart of that community, and that's kind of what I wanted it to be based around. The stream team's a tiny bit of it, so I would say the best thing, if even if you maybe have hopes and dreams of joining the GlitchCo stream team one day, we will reopen apps within a few months from now. We haven't finished figuring out when that will be, but I would say be a part of the Discord, get to know these amazing communities, find a home away from your own home, you know. And yeah, we have some GlitchCo events coming up that are going to be pretty fun. I think we're going to be doing another, like, D does a 12-hour, I don't know, maybe Valheim or something with all like people from GlitchCo coming in and out. So we'll do that and some other community stuff in there. So really excited to focus now that I'm full-time on the GlitchCo server and do more stuff in the GlitchCo server, watching things, playing games with everybody. And so that's stuff to look forward to. And again, thank you for having me today.
Yeah, most welcome. It was really great. Hopefully I can have you on again in the future. Awesome. So that was, again, 8bitDee. So check them out